Welcome to 12 News at 4. Breaking this afternoon, former President Donald Trump has been found guilty on all counts in his New York hush money case. He's the first former president in history to be convicted of a crime. Shortly after the verdict was read, Trump huddled with his team just outside the courtroom. The jury found Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in connection with a hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels near the end of the 2016 presidential campaign. In comments to the press on his way out of the courthouse, Trump maintained his innocence and made it clear that he believes the verdict will not stop his run for the White House.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent, and I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end, and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
Joining me now is criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz of Diaz Law. Hector, what was your reaction to this guilty verdict?
I mean, this is a historic moment. I mean, this is one of these where you're going to sit back, you're going to think, you know, where was I at when I heard this? I know I was in my car listening to this verdict, and, you know, this first time that a president, former president, is a convicted felon.
Yeah.
And it's just, it is.
And candidate.
Yeah.
Current candidate.
It is shocking. It's shocking. I think we're going to be talking about this for months and months and months leading up to his sentencing.
Right. Did you see that he would be found guilty on all 34 counts?
No, I thought that you'd get a split verdict based on, you know, when the jury came back and they said, hey, we need some time to go over the jury verdicts. The thought there was that they were going to go over each one, because typically if it's guilty on all counts, pretty quick. Right? So the thought was, okay, split verdicts, maybe they find him guilty on some of the, where you have stronger evidence, where he signed some of these checks that were ultimately submitted. Maybe those were the counts that they were going to find him guilty on. But all counts, yeah, that is a bit surprising.
Could he be looking at jail time?
Could he? Yes. The maximum sentence, I think, is 4 years prison. Will he? Unlikely. Unlikely. You know, he has never, of course, never been convicted of a felony. There's probation, which is an appropriate sentence here. His lawyers will undoubtedly, there's going to be a slew of motions that get filed before even sentencing, you know, asking for motion for new trial. There's all sorts of issues they're going to raise after he's sentenced, which I know we have a date in July.
July 11th.
Unlikely that date will go forward.
Okay, so that was the date that he was going to be sentenced. So you don't think that sentencing date of July 11th will happen? There will be numerous motions, probably in appeals. Absolutely.
Well, the appeals will come after his sentence, but there are some motions that his lawyers will likely make pre-sentencing in terms of the verdict. They're just standard motions that they're going to have to file, right? And so that's going to take some time. The court has already set a deadline in June for those motions to be filed. I expect these attorneys are going to ask for additional time and reset the sentencing date.
Well, and hasn't that been the case? I mean, very typical of these Trump cases, where it's just, you know, prolonging that time, asking for more time, trying to delay it as we get into election season.
Absolutely. I will say, though, asking for additional time for sentencing on a complex white-collar case isn't unheard of. And so this is a kind of situation where I just don't see that date going.
Okay. Let's talk about, though, that sentencing phase, if and when eventually it happens, right? What will happen? Guide us through.
There's some lead up. So he actually will have to meet with a representative of the probation department. There's what's called a pre-sentence interview in New York. So he's going to have to sit down with a pre-sentence writer, is what we call him. And they're going to ask him a lot of questions about his background, about his finances, about his associations. And it's going to be interesting in terms of how that interview goes on, because he's going to be there. He'll have his lawyer present. That information gets condensed in what's called a pre-sentence report. That gets submitted over to the court. The judge reviews it. And the probation department will make a recommendation based on the information they've collected about former President Trump in terms of what they believe is an appropriate sentence in light of the information they have, the offenses he committed. It is really odd that we're sitting here talking about, former President Trump is going to have to go through what we in this industry call a PSR interview, and he's going to have to do it.
Okay. I'm wondering, would he be able to vote?
Great question. His resides in Florida. One of the rights that he's going to lose now as a convicted felon is his right to vote. And Florida has a rule that you have to fulfill your sentence before you can go ahead and reinstate it. Unlikely he's going to fulfill his sentence by the time he's there.
By the time in November.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we have never seen anything like this. A former president and a current presidential candidate convicted in a criminal case ever, let alone just months from the election. Today's verdict obviously has legal implications for Trump, but it also has a lot of political implications for him, especially right here in Arizona as a swing state. We want to bring in 12 News political insider Bram Resnick into this conversation. Bram, I got to get your reaction. Guilty on all 34 counts.
I'll tell you, I had no expectations about what the jury would do for one reason. I think Hector might agree with this. You have to be in the courtroom. This wasn't televised. We didn't see it.
Great point.
You can't watch the jury. You can't hear the arguments. It's really tough to filter through the cable coverage and try to decide, I think they're going to acquit. I think they're going to convict.
That's a great point. You're in a bubble. Those jurors were in a bubble. There's only certain evidence that they can hear. We have, the benefit of watching CNN or this channel, Channel 12, all these other networks that are filtering tons and tons of information, and that's not what these jurors hear. And they may have focused on very minute pieces that they felt carried the burden.
Right.
And give the jurors credit. They're very thoughtful people. They take their jobs very seriously.
Yeah, and they deliberated for a good amount of time, a week or so? Or?
Yeah, it is interesting, the amount of time here. For a complex white-collar case, it's not unheard of to have them deliberate for a week. So this is kind of a verdict that came back a little quicker than I expected, given the counts, given the information. But those jurors want to get it right. They want to be considerate of the evidence, the time that's being put into it. But I think at the end of the day, what really may have tipped the scales here in favor of the state was the manner in which Trump went about his defense. And that's an issue. I mean, we're going to be debating this as lawyers for some time here in how he presented it, and ultimately how he focused on Stormy Daniels and really kind of cross-examined Stormy Daniels in that manner. You didn't really have to do that.
And I have to think too, as a juror, I mean, we are talking probably the most highest profile case, right? I mean, this is so historic. It is unprecedented. The weight and the gravity on those jurors, I mean, I can't even imagine.
But not just that. Think about what's happened to jurors in other cases. They are tracked down. Their opponents will try to find out who they are, their identities, reach them on social media, perhaps even threaten them, threaten the judge. We've seen all this before. This is a new phenomenon, frankly, of the Trump era, these kinds of attacks. So those jurors and their families have to be concerned about that right now.
Absolutely. I mean, considering how divisive this has been with the candidates, and it has just been really, really ugly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Talk about the reaction that we have seen really from everyone, elected officials especially.
Yeah, I got 4 responses here. It's fairly predictable. Let's hear first. Gina Swoboda, chair of the Arizona Republican Party, issued this statement, quote, "This conviction is a blatant assault on the principles of justice. President Trump's trial was marred by bias and a predetermined agenda, stripping him of the fair trial to which every American is entitled to." Now, Carrie Lake, she's the front runner in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate and a staunch Trump defender. She had this to say, quote, "We just witnessed the most egregious example of election interference and an outright mockery of the rule of law in the 246-year history of our republic. This entire process, right down to the verdict, has itself been nothing but a shameful political stunt." I would add, this is the 248th year of the United States. The verdict itself has been nothing but a shameful political stunt. And Congressman Ruben Gallego, the likely Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate, tweeted, "I respect our justice system and the rule of law. The process played out, and we should always demand accountability from our elected leaders." You might be wondering, what did the White House say? There was this simple statement: "We respect the rule of law and have no additional comment." I should add, President Joe Biden and his family have gathered in Delaware today to mark the 9th anniversary of his son, Beau Biden's death. We know how close the president was to his son and what this day means. So this day, doubly significant, personally and politically, for the president.
And talk about the polls, too.
The polls are interesting. There's going to be a lot of polling over the next few days, a rush to poll voters. What's your reaction? What we know leading up to it is there was significant attention being paid on cable TV. Here's a poll that was done in February in Arizona. This is the last one I'm aware of. Asked about all the trials, the indictments former President Trump is facing. 93% said they knew about them. Among Democrats, 65% believed he was guilty, 6% not guilty. Republicans, 56% not guilty, 11% guilty. That's a somewhat ambivalent, more ambivalent than you would expect. Independent voters said 34% guilty, 26% not guilty. That poll from Noble Predictive Insights. And again, we're going to see a lot of these polls over the next few days. That the conviction is real.
Right, and anything can change too. People change their minds. Also, I want to close this with, from both a legal perspective as well as a political perspective, especially since you say, there's so much that will happen before that sentencing.
Right.
How do you think this will affect his campaign?
We don't know. I wonder, how will this affect his campaign, and how will this affect Donald Trump? This is a heavy weight to bear, 34 felonies. I have to wonder, if you've been reading his personal history, what his father Fred would have said to him right now. He told Donald Trump, be a killer. He's not a killer right now. So emotionally, that has to have some effect, wear him down perhaps. We'll see what the voters say. And again, in the world we live in, what's the timeline on this story, right? How long will this last? 24, 48 hours? Remember how the Access Hollywood tape in 2016, October, was going to doom his candidacy? It didn't.
But timeline-wise, November is going to be here before we know it.
For sure, and there are other days. There's a Republican convention that's coming up, and he's got to deal with the fact that his opponent at every opportunity is going to say, this is a convicted felon.
Yeah.
You want your president to be a convicted felon. And he knows that he's going to take a lot of hits in terms of that. And it's got to take its emotional toll.
Well, and with all these motions and, the sentencing, the appeal, that's got to be a huge burden, if you will, trying to become president.
Absolutely. He is, as he called it, the icebox there in being in court in New York. And that's the last place he wants to be. Now he's got to come back.
That's a really good point. You have to remember, for folks in court, that is the last place they ever want to be. It is humiliating. It is the worst day of their life. And now what he's going to have to go through with all the pre-sentencing, that happens, stuff we never see, that goes on every day in our court system. People processed all the time. Now he is just one of them, a convicted felon who's going to have to talk to a probation officer.
It's going to be long and tedious.
Those are terrible days.
Yeah. All right, Bram, thank you very much. 12 News, of course, will have continuing coverage of this historic verdict throughout the day on 12 News at 5, 6, and 10. And remember, we're always on at 12news.com, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and all our social media channels.